good afternoon, everyone. Hi, thanks for joining us today.
I can't believe what an audience.
What a great crowd. So let's get stuck in. So, iconic. What made you want to write a memoir, Zandra? Why now?
I think it's because you asked me.
There is a kernel of truth in that, but also you were ready, weren't you? You wanted to share your story.
It was about the right time, yes, to sort of dig into my background.
So, for anyone that hasn't read it yet, the book is structured into 50 objects, many of which Zandra herself owns. You've described yourself as a hoarder. What makes you want to keep so much?
I think there's a memory behind everything, whether it's, unfortunately, a stone on the beach or a fan that I got given by Karl Lagerfeld. You know, they're all different things that you take it home and you think, oh, well, I've got to put it somewhere of value. And then they do get stacked and they collect the dust very nicely.
Do those things, do they inspire you, inspire your work?
Yes, I think things that you have around you, there's one day you might have them sitting there and then one day they suddenly jump out at you and have some sort of meaning, like when we started to do the book and thinking how the meaning of different things could lead you on to different parts of life's adventure, really.
Exactly. So each of the objects in the book, they represent a milestone or a jumping off point to talk about parts of your life, isn't that right? Do you have a favourite chapter in the book?
I mean, I think I really have to say the starting point's my mother, who was absolutely fantastic and an extraordinary character that I looked up to and admired and really was the biggest influence of the whole of my life.
And what was the most challenging chapter, do you think, to work on? What was the hardest to unearth?
The hardest chapter was probably the bit digging into my father and his background, because my father was an extremely handsome man that my mother married and stayed married to, but I always felt, I think children often are terrible snobs, and I always felt he should have bettered himself from being just a truck driver, really. You know, but as I say, I think children are snobs and you only realise later in life they're other people's other value.
What changed your opinion of him? What did you find out that shifted your perspective on him?
Probably really working out the reality of the fact that he'd had a terrible childhood in a small town like Chatham, where his mother had been brutally murdered through obviously having an affair with the lodger, you know, and apparently it was in all the newspapers and was something that he had to live with all his life.
Yeah.
He never told me. I found out sort of from my mother, but then really only because my sister's granddaughter started to do ancestry and finding out all about it.
Yeah, yeah. So he was a survivor, really, your dad?
He was a survivor, exactly.
Well, let's go back to your mum. So I'm not quite sure
Where does the film start? Does it come behind us?
Is it that way? Oh, thank you.
Oh, I see. Oh, we can't see
moving?
the screens, so you're all going to see the screens.
I don't know where I'm supposed to be pointing this to.
It's changing
Oh,
miraculously.
is it? Oh, gosh, it is changing. Sorry, everybody.
So you have to put it back to the...
We're on to chapter 6 already. We really have glided along. Here we are.
There you are.
So this
Lucky I know what my mother looks like, because I can't see from here.
Yes, thank goodness for that.
I can see a little bit.
You sure? Thank you. Thank you. That's really kind. Thank you. Audience participation so early on. Thank you. So this is Beatrice Rhodes,
So
your extraordinary mum.
This would be in the 60s, and you can see how exotic she was. She taught in the local art college, and she made her own dresses, although that might have been one made by her students for the dress show. And it really opening with the first chapter is she was always rushing about, never stood still, and she put her hair back in a French pleat, and then she pinned this big curl that she sprayed silver, and then she put hairspray on it to set it. And it was 5 o'clock one morning, and we're rushing to go to London for the day just before Christmas, and she sprays her hair, and out we rush. We're on the bus going to the train station, and she keeps saying, "My head does sting. My head does sting." And she realised that she'd put fly killer spray instead of, because that was also sitting in the kitchen. So she went into the chemist. She said, "You may think I'm an idiot, but the man said, you're going to have to live with it all day or go home and wash your hair." So in fact, we went to London for our Christmas shopping, and she just had a stinging head that had to wear off at that time.
I love that she chose shopping rather than go back and wash fly spray out of her hair. That was more important. Your mum was also, she worked in fashion, before she even had you.
She obviously was an extremely brave, exotic woman. I didn't see all that as a child, but I'm born in 1940, but somewhere in the mid-30s, she decided she'd go to Paris and work in Paris, and she couldn't speak French, and she went to Paris and went to the House of Worth and became a pattern maker at the House of Worth. And she said what she'd do is, she wouldn't tell them if she didn't know how to do something. She'd go up and she'd say, "Well, would you show me the method that you really want used, because my method might be different from yours." So
smart woman, wasn't she?
So she was amazing at draping on a dress stand and making clothes, and she was always doing that in between teaching at the art college. She'd be making wedding dresses, and if my sister and I promised to be good and not fight each other while we were watching, we were allowed to see her do the fitting for the wedding.
What was the greatest thing she taught you, do you think?
Probably never give up. Just keep doing things that you believe in. She never stopped me from doing anything. I was always drawing and painting, whereas my sister was much better than me. And in the holidays, she went to work in things like the canning factory and things like that, whereas I was always out with my sketchbook drawing, and no one said, "Well, you've got to do anything else."
Do you think, you've always said to me that you never notice when people look at you in the street, people often stare at Zandra because of her fabulous hair and makeup. Yes, but your mum would have looked so different to everyone else in post-war Chatham.
She did.
Do you think
really.
you developed your thick skin from her?
When she came to school open days, I'd say, "Please don't look different from all the other mothers," because she'd have wonderful platform green lizard shoes and a wonderful hat and her sprayed hair. She always looked different from all the mothers, and I always assumed that she was a lot younger than all the other mothers, but I think she was about the same age. But she just looked a lot different.
I wonder where you get it from then, eh? We're on to the next slide. Thank you. So, your sketchbooks. How important are your sketchbooks to you in terms of your creative process, but also in terms of processing difficulties?
I've always kept a sketchbook, so if I go on holiday, I have a rule that I have to draw every day, So when I'm going over to Sicily after this, and I'm going to do drawings, and it might be a tree, it could be a group of people. I never know what the drawing's going to be, but I'll sit and do the drawing, whatever. So, you somehow, if you draw it, you remember it more than if you just sort of take a quick photograph.
It's
Photograph
imprinted.
can get forgotten, whereas it's on the sheet of paper. And the other rule is you start from page 1 and you work your way to the end, and you never tear one out. So if you do a terrible sketch, you have to live with it or draw over the top of it. But it's a memory that's there of something you maybe didn't draw it the right size or something, but it's there for you to remember for the rest of its life.
How did you find, when we were doing the research for the book and we poured through hundreds of sketchbooks, how did you find that experience looking back on those drawings?
It's been a wonderful adventure looking back and going through the memories of them, although I do look back to the sketches like if I've just done a collection, like we've just done a collection for a Spanish company called Celia B, well, then I can't do the same set of designs for someone else. So sometimes you'll end up looking through the book and thinking, what else have I done that's totally different that will lead to a different series of designs?
It's like a foundation point to delve back into.
Yes, just to start you off as the background for something.
No, it makes sense. Thank you. Yes. How old were you here, Zandra?
I would have been 23 then. That's when I left the Royal College of Art, and I still had black hair. It's actually grey underneath this, but I had black hair then. And then this was my final year at the Royal College of Art, and I chose to do I'd seen a wonderful Hockney painting where he'd got the generals with all their medals, so it put me on to thinking, I'll do designs on medals. So I went and did a lot of sketches in the Wellington Museum at 1 Hyde Park Gate of all the Duke of Wellington's medals, and then I went to the War Museum and ended up doing prints with medals. And the one behind me was one that my first print I ever sold to Heels for furnishing fabrics. And then I printed my yellow dress that you can see, and my mother made that one for me.
Of course she did, of course. So when you were at the Royal College, as you said, your peers included Hockney. What were your impressions with him? I know he was 2 years above you?
He was a third year when I was a first year, so they didn't talk to each other. But
you were lowly first year.
I'd seen him from afar.
Was he were people talking about his talent then, Zandra?
He was definitely the golden boy of that period of the time, although they did have a lot of other people who were quite wonderful, like Alan Jones and Norman Ackroyd, who's only just died, who's like the world's top etcher. And so there were lots of exciting people when I was at Royal College. Ozzie Clark was 2 years behind me, and I'm trying to think, Janice Wainwright was there. There were a lot of different people there. It was a very exciting time to be at the Royal College.
Pauline Boaty, she was there just before you, wasn't she?
But I didn't know her either.
What time to be there.
It was a wonderful time to be there, yes.
Yeah. Even as a student, you worked supernaturally hard. You would arrive at 7:30 a.m., you would leave at 10. Not many students do that. I did not. What drove you? Why did you want to work that hard?
I enjoyed being at college. I mean, it wasn't that we never spoke to each other. You know, it would be great fun.
Yeah.
And a lot of people sort of would play around and come and go. And I was the most popular at 9 o'clock in the morning because you had to sign the registry at before 9, and people were always phoning me to go down and forge their signature in the book so that they were in on time.
What turned you, you're known for your prints. That's, you were the first person to create prints that dictated the form of a silhouette. Normally it's the other way around. What was it about print that you really gravitated towards?
Well, I went to the Royal College to be a textile print designer. And at the time in the shops, we were sent around looking at shops, and we'd go to Liberty's, and they were doing, they're very pretty, those little floral Liberty prints and everything. And then there were a lot of textures and things like that. But in my second year, I fell in love with doing prints for garments. And it was at the time when Pucci was just starting to do the dresses with the all-over prints. And in fact, in my second year, Pucci came to London to do an appearance at a shop called Woollands. And they said, Zandra, we'll organise an interview for you. And my mother made me a little grey Emmanuel Khan copy suit. And I went in and put my designs all... It's always very difficult being textile design. It's not very glamorous. You put all the papers out on the floor, and then the grand man walked in his beautiful Italian suit and took one look and then said, perhaps you should design in black and white.
Gosh. How did you take that? Did you take it on the chin? Were you a bit bruised?
Well, they all thought I'd be offered a job at Pucci, but I wasn't offered a job.
Quite far from that, yeah.
Then when I left Royal College and they did take me up to Manchester to sell my work, and then the people in Manchester looked at it and said, well, we've sold 1 million yards of this dreadful texture. They didn't call it a dreadful texture. and they said, so no one bought anything. And then they suggested that I went to 2 girls in who were just in Carnaby Street, Fole and Tuffin, Marion Fole and Sally Tuffin. And they'd been using the Liberties prints, and then I worked for them for 3 years, and I did sort of little stars, and I did all sorts of explosion-y pop art prints. So I worked for them with doing prints. And then after 3 years, they said that they were going on to other things, and I had met Vanessa Redgrave, and she backed, and I'd met Sylvia Ayton, who'd also been to the Royal College of Art and made dresses, because I never thought that I'd be making dresses. So we got together as a partnership, and we Vanessa backed us to open the Fulham Road clothes shop, and we did clothes for that. And then that actually, it was very hard work, and I was still teaching 2 days a week, and so was Sylvia. But we did sort of meet quite amazing people. Penelope Tree came in and bought one of our floaty pyjama outfits and everything, and I was printing them by hand in Bayswater in my 6-yard studio. And then that collapsed, and Sylvia said, bye-bye, I've now got a job with Wallace Shops, and she ended up as their top designer till only a few years ago.
Wow.
And I ended up without a job. So, but I'd got all these ideas. During this time, I've met these 2 mad Ukrainian-American models who said, Zandra, you must bring your collection to America, you'll make a fortune. And somehow I believed them. And so I put together a collection of caftans, and maybe you've seen the yellow coat, there's one in the V&A as well, but a big felt yellow coat with beads on the end and caftans. And I got a letter from English Vogue to the head of American Vogue, and I got myself, I had one other American friend who said, Zandra, you must come and stay with me in New York. So we went over to New York, and I had my letter of introduction to Deanna Vreeland, the high priestess of fashion,
legendary
editor. And so I get to New York, and I phone up, and she agrees to see me. And that time I had my
Zandra, sorry to interrupt you here. We should probably pull up the picture on the screen of the Vogue shoot.
Oh, yeah, is that the next one?
We've actually...
I don't know what picture.
Actually,
Hang on.
if you could go one more. That's it, lovely. So this here is...
Oh, that's the yellow coat, and that's the caftan. So I went to America with the idea as well, which I think could have been true, that they wouldn't say, oh, you're a textile designer, you can't make dresses. You know, I went as dress and textile designer. And so... I went there, and I had my high white beaver boots and my trousers tucked into my boots and a headscarf tied round, hippie style, with red lipstick curls on my face. And I took the clothes in that you can see there, and she was one of the most amazing. There has been a film on her recently. She was the most amazing woman. She had dyed black hair that was pulled back, and then all her face was shaded red around the edge with rouge.
Quite dramatic.
Oh, she was really dramatic. Woman. And I walked in, and she absolutely raved about the clothes and said, we must photograph them on Natalie Wood. So she photographed them on Natalie Wood.
Which is this shoot that you can see here.
That's her in them, isn't it? And then she made another phone call to the top boutique in New York in 57th Street, Henry Bendel, and sent me round there, and they ordered the clothes. And she also phoned up some top society women who bought caftans from me. And I really went, I didn't get anyone to back me, but she photographed that, and then that was in American Vogue, and then for the next 20 years, I'd go backwards and forwards doing shows in America and then making them in my little studio in Bayswater at that
So
time.
she set you on your path.
She
was
set
your
me on the
fashion
path.
fairy godmother.
That's it, fairy godmother.
I want to go back quickly to London. I mean, obviously, you were part of Swinging London when it was at its perhaps most exciting. What do you think made the fashion industry boom in such a big way then? There were just so many influential designers. You had Mary Quant, you had Ozzie Clark, you had yourself. What made it such a fertile ground for those businesses to thrive?
I think it was the booming of the youth culture, really, starting with Mary Quant and really going into the young designers that were around, like Fole and Tuffin, David Sassoon, all of them were... London was a hub, plus the music industry.
Yeah.
So you had the Beatles at their height, and then the other different groups, like maybe Jerry and the Pacemakers, or different groups that were all sort of going on. So it really was swinging London with films like The Knack and Michael Caine in Alfie. You know what I mean? All those things were sort of going on, that London was a place that they were wanting to come to. So it made it a sort of hub with people coming. I mean, I sometimes was quite amazed, really, at thinking at the different people that called at my funny little attic studio in the middle of nowhere at Royal Oak Tube Station, and it was either Britt Eklund with who was her husband now?
Peter Sellers.
Peter Sellers. Do you know what I mean? Or making dresses for Sandy Shaw or things like that, because they were all wanting to do these floaty dresses. So it was an amazing sort of time, really.
It sounds like you captured a moment and a spirit.
Yes, I think it was sort of something that happens, and with luck I could follow along with it and being part of it.
And then over to New York. So, as you said, you were, over the next 20 years, you flew back and forth to the States, because in London your work was seen as too bold. Why do you think it was so warmly welcomed by the Americans? What was it about your aesthetic that they liked so much?
I think it sort of captured part of the slightly hippie culture, but it wasn't sort of the miniskirt, it was then the flowing printed chiffons. And I wasn't just told that I was a textile designer, because I was, in fact, there's another chapter that I know we've got where I was offered a job by Oscar de la Renta, but he only wanted me to do the prints for him without my name, so I turned down that job and managed to exist making my dresses.
Where did that sense of self-belief? Because Oscar de la Renta was, when he offered you the job, he was a big deal then. Where did that self-belief come from?
I don't really know. All I knew was that I wanted to be able to do my work, and I didn't like teaching, which was something that my mother was very disappointed, because she adored teaching. She really loved that, but I didn't enjoy it. And I just wanted to be doing my textiles, and I was enjoying the textiles and enjoying the life of going and being influenced by different things, like going to the Museum of the American Indian and seeing how they put feathers on things, and then doing my prints with all the feathers. So it was a really quite wonderful time when I look back at it.
I mean, you were there for the Studio 54 years.
Studio 54 hadn't even started when I first went there. First it was Warhol with his with the factory. And
tell me a bit about Andy Warhol, because you've always been a big fan of his art, but less of him as a man.
He was very strange. He didn't talk, and he had this wig plonked on his head, and it really was plonked. It wasn't like pretending that it wasn't a wig. It was a wig. And there were several different ones, but they were all the blonde wigs. But he was always surrounded by perfect henchmen who were either poets or all in smart suits and everything like that. And then he bought all of Karl Lagerfeld's Art Deco furniture for his office. So it was always very grand, with people floating in and out. It was quite wonderful.
And you fell asleep.
And overwhelming.
Yes, I'm sure. I mean, you fell asleep on his shoulder at Studio 54. I've seen the pictures.
Not on his shoulder.
I've seen the picture.
Well, anyway, but I used to fall asleep everywhere. People say to me now, "You don't fall asleep." I said, "That's because I go to bed earlier."
What did you think of that scene, that Studio 54 scene?
It was quite overwhelming going to this sort of club where you'd look across and there'd be Halston with Bianca Jagger and Andy would be just sort of watching it all with all his group around him. So and then you'd see the other different fashion designers in there at that time.
Wow. What a wild thing to have been part of.
It was amazing when I look back.
Yes. If we could go to the next slide, thank you. Next slide.
Which is the next slide?
It is Andrew Logan's bust. So Andrew Logan is a wonderful sculptor, a brilliant mind, and one of your best friends. And you describe friendship in the book as like life's double cream. What makes, well, firstly, I suppose, what binds you to Andrew? Why has he been so important
most of
to
my
you?
close friends are artists in themselves, so it's always great fun to... We've been on sketching trips together, but we went around Morocco. I first took him to India when I was going on a wonderful trip. And he does watercolours and I do sketches, and then that leads us on to different adventures. And then I got a very conservative boyfriend, and Andrew said, well, I'm frightened you're going to dye your hair black. I'll make a sculpture of you, and so that's a sculpture he did of me.
Little did you know you were never dyeing your hair anything other than pink.
It's more or less stayed pink most of the time.
I mean, a lot of your friends you've been friends with now for 40, 50 years. What do you think it takes to sustain a long-term friendship like that? What ingredients do you need?
Often it's mutual admiration. You know, I've been involved in a lot of projects he's done. I've made his women's half of his costume for the Alternative Miss World. We've been on wonderful adventures in India where he's now done lots of sculptures. So it's quite wonderful being involved with things like that. And often they're critical and say, "Oh, you don't look all right in that." It's not like they think. It's not like they think I'm always right. They don't.
Honesty is important then. If we could go to the next slide. Thank you. This is another one of your dear friends.
Oh, that's with Carl, is it?
At the Met Gala in 1984, was that, or 3? Firstly, what was the Met Gala like?
The
Was
Met
it as
Gala
glamorous as it looks?
It wasn't quite. It did have the staircase, but it wasn't quite like it is now, where it's. But it was sort of this wonderful thing where you know that the stars all came dressed up. Of course, Carl came with his magical fan, and then he gave me a magical fan, and I've drawn that in the book as well. And he was always very nice to me. I first got to know him when I was doing a range of prints for a company in Paris in 1971. And then he said, "Oh, you must sell your clothes to some of the Parisian stores." And he actually phoned up and asked them if they'd carry some of my things. So it was an interesting time.
Carl is known for being quite acerbic and quite sharp with his tongue. But you've always described him to me as very kind. Is that still something that that's a sort of pervasive memory of him?
I think the thing about Carl was that he sort of collected people that had special characteristics. So, for example, first of all, I got to know him very well in Japan, where he was great friends with Antonio, the fashion artist. So
Antonio Lopez.
Antonio drew me and Carl at different times. And then I'd see him in Paris with Anna Piaggi, who was also an amazing... she was head of Italian Vogue, and again, a wonderful, wonderful character. And she always had white. She was always carrying a white umbrella as a sort of walking stick, and was looking fabulous. And then we had dinner once, and she was with her walking stick in very Victorian clothes. I was in white punk with 3 eyebrows, and Carl was looking very chic with his fan.
What a group. What a group. What do you think of the fashion industry today? Do you think it's become more conservative? Do you think it's still as creative as it was? What's your take?
I think that the UK has always bred originals. I think it's a serious problem that we've separated from Europe, but I think our youth are very strong, and I think as long as they keep fighting away, we'll win through in the end. We don't have a choice.
Exactly.
We've got to just
Yes.
encourage the youth to keep going and really do, create, and then whether they have to leave the country in some way to go further than here is what we have to wait and see what will happen.
But to keep the faith.
Keep the faith.
On to the next slide, please. Sorry.
Oh, Freddie.
Freddie, so you have dressed some of the most legendary rock stars, from Mark Bolan of T-Rex to Freddie. Tell me...
1975, or maybe it was 74, one of the two. And I was still in my funny little studio in Bayswater before I got a slightly larger factory. And I get a phone call, I think it was Brian that made the phone call, that they'd like to come and look at some clothes. And I said, well, you'll have to come in the evening, because I didn't have a changing room, because it was just a cutting table and the machinists and everything. So they came in the evening and climbed up the rickety stairs up to me. And it was Brian May and Freddie. And he was very shy. He didn't really say very much. And
Really?
then I'd pick things out of the rail and say, how about that one? And then I said, try them on. And it was a pleated wedding top, that particular one, with lace at the front. And told him to go in front of the mirror. So he went in front of the mirror and did various movements and decided on that. And then Brian had pleated jackets. He always got stolen. It's amazing. I made several on that.
Hot property. That's a compliment.
So it's wonderful that of all the clothes that Freddie gets remembered in, it's the pleated top that he wore.
Why do you think it's become so iconic?
Looks better than a T-shirt.
It does. It does. It
You
does.
know, a black T-shirt might be wonderful when he's performing on the stage, but the picture looks better when he's moving around.
Do you think clothes have the power to transform the way we feel? Because that picture there, and the way he looks there, sounds very different to your description of him as being quite shy and quiet.
Yes, but a lot of the people, a pop star of some kind, they're not going to perform for me, are they? It's something within themselves that makes them want to perform, and and something that comes out that goes towards the audience that they're going to notice.
So it helps them. I think, well, it sounds like how you look in something depends on how you feel in it. And he
Yes.
felt like a rock star.
And then it
in that.
turned into that.
Yeah.
And so then I was invited to the performance, which I went to, and it was at the Albert Hall. And I went with my great friend, Dougie Field, the painter. And I think we were at least 10 years older than most of the audience at that time.
I mean, you didn't know who Queen were when they called, did you?
No, I had to ask my girls what they played. Unless it's on Desert Island Discs on Radio 4, I wouldn't know what they play.
Thank you. So this beautiful dress here is the one that Princess Anne wore to announce
Princess Anne's
her
engagement dress. So I get a phone call from English Vogue saying, we're dressing a very important lady, and would you send some important type of dresses in? So I sent important dresses in. I thought it was Elizabeth Taylor. I didn't know who it was going to be. And then it was only a month later that Norman Parkinson, who took the picture, phoned me up and said my dress had been chosen for Princess Anne to announce her
You
engagement.
must have been over the moon.
It was wonderful. But she's wearing it over a Gina Frattini.
Why is that?
Because apparently Prince Philip thought my dress was a bit too transparent.
You can't be a royal and wear a naked dress. You
And
just
then
can't.
then I was in America again, and I came back, and there were all these photographers waiting in a bank to take my photograph because they all thought I'd do the wedding dress, but I didn't get asked to do that.
How do you feel about that in hindsight? I'm sure you were bruised at the time, but
I was bruised. I would have liked to have done something like that, although when you look in hindsight at different people that have got the wedding dresses for a job, it doesn't always help their careers in the end.
no.
It didn't help the Emmanuels.
No. Do you think
You
it?
know.
Why is that? Is that just the pressure?
I would have thought the pressure, because you've got to keep everything secret. You've got everything going on, so you can't have people in. So it's obviously a very pressurised thing
I
that they
suppose
go
it-
through.
It puts the beauty of it is that it puts your business on a completely different scale, but you have to have the infrastructure to
You
be
then
able to
have
deliver.
to have the infrastructure for it to go that bit further. But I still think it's a beautiful picture
She
of her.
looks amazing.
that
I
looks
love that
very
picture.
good. It shows you the power of photographers too.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I think the dress stands alone. The dress helps. And you've met all of the royal family now, pretty much, haven't most of them?
No.
Well, you met the Queen. You met Princess Margaret. You've
I've
dressed
met the Queen.
Diana.
I haven't dressed the Queen.
No. But you're a big fan of Anne. What is it about Princess Anne that you really like?
She's a wonderful hard worker. She's quite amazing.
Grafter.
I mean, when she does all the awards, you know, she remembers everyone, and she's got all the right questions. She's just incredible. She stands there and has the right thing to say without the equerry having to go.
Yeah, that's quite impressive, it is.
It is impressive.
One of my favourite stories. Diana Ross.
Oh,
Isn't
Diana
it true
Ross.
that she once threatened to kill you?
Well, not quite like that. I had a shop in Mayfair for about 15, 20 years, and she was doing a concert in London, and she came into the shop, and as always I go into the shop, and when I go in I'm all dressed up, so I had a very nice turban on.
You can imagine, yeah.
I was all dressed up for the part, and she bought the most wonderful. She bought one of my red pleated jackets and a long chiffon dress. Looked gorgeous on her, and she invited me to her concert that she was doing in, I think it was in the Apollo Theatre, and she invited me to come to the reception afterwards, and I saw her there. About maybe 6 months later, I'm in Los Angeles with my girlfriend, driving along in my girlfriend's Cadillac, and my girlfriend said, "Look, there's Diana Ross getting out of her car. Go and say hello." Pushes me out of the car, so I get out of the car and start walking up the path, because they don't have fences in America. It's all open. So I'm walking up the path, and this voice says, "If you come one step nearer, I will close this garage door down on you." So get back in the car, shaking, and then I realised that she'd seen me in a turban. She didn't know I had coloured hair, but my hair was a really weird sort of faded grass green with feathers stuck on the end, and high white boots and a flowing silk dress. Anyway, I come down to breakfast in the morning, and my girlfriend and her husband are sitting at the breakfast table with bags under their eyes because they've been woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning. And apparently Diana Ross was doing a recording with Barbara Streisand. She must have said, "This weird girl came up the pathway." And Diana Streisand, she must have said, "I think that's Zandra Rhodes." And I think she phoned around to find out where I was staying. So she came round for breakfast that morning to see us. So that was very nice.
So the picture, the smaller picture, the Polaroid, I think that's
and
you
that
and her at
Polaroid
breakfast.
is her doing a fitting at the time
Yeah.
in the house, yes.
Thank you. So this is your Grafton Street shop, which is a street just off Bond Street.
Oh, that's a shop she would have come to, which I had from the mid-70s to very late 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And it had 2 big silver mirrored Zs, and we pin all the chiffon dresses out all beautifully. So it was a very, very chic shop when people were coming to London a lot.
What do you think? Is there still space for bricks and mortar stores today in a world of e-commerce? Do you think they're still important?
Well, I think life will become very awful if all we've got to do is do everything remotely by sending away for things and never having a chance to look at oneself and do things like that. It would be sad if it all goes, but at the moment, if you go down Bond Street, to me it's so empty.
It's very quiet.
I can't imagine how they all keep going.
I think that's so important.
But I mean, maybe life is due for some sort of change. I do think that we shouldn't think of clothes that we've got to just wear for one season and not wear again. I think we've got to think of combinations. Something starts to wear out and you put something different with it, so that it's not always high fashion, always changing. I can't think of anything worse. I mean, I don't think about when things were made. I just put them on and see if I feel all right in front of the mirror.
Thank you. So this is your conceptual chic collection, your punk-inspired collection.
Dear. Yes. In the, let me think, I'm trying to think the exact date. I think it's 1987. And I'd been doing, since 1970, I'd been doing all these flowing printed chiffons. And I suddenly thought this beautiful French jersey, and I'd been looking at wonderful Schiaparelli dress that she did with a Dali print on, with printed holes. And I thought, hang on, why don't I try something where you actually make holes and then you get safety pins and you pin it all beautifully and you put chain on it. So we made the collection that season. And my partner, who was wonderful, Anne Knight, who was this incredible lady who'd been head at Fortnum's before she joined my store, and she was my partner together with Ronnie Sterling. And she said, well, if we do this, Zandra, we really have to make a dramatic statement. We'll have to do the whole shop out. We did a tree with torn jersey, and we put the dresses all beautifully in the front, and we put the chiffon dresses at the back. And it stayed there for 3 weeks, and we didn't sell anything. Chiffon dresses back.
It's good to try.
But in fact, well, two things. They're now amazing collector's items. I know that Philadelphia Museum paid something like $10,000 for a black top. And then, was it Versace?
Yes.
Versace did the dress for Elizabeth Hurley 10 years after mine, with the safety pins. And Susie Menkes, the top journalist in the world, wrote and said Zandra Rhodes had done it 10 years before, and she was banned from his shows for 2 seasons. Only 2 seasons.
Truth hurts.
So anyway,
how do you approach homages like that? Because this has happened to you several times.
The homage is nice, but it doesn't go to your pocket.
No, quite.
But luckily, people still valued the chiffon dresses, so that's the most important thing.
But in terms of people kind of being heavily influenced by you and not crediting it, how do you approach that? How do you make your peace with it?
Well, we do have one book that I keep, and it says on the cover, knockoffs. And we put my original, and then we put the person, I'm not going to mention names, but we put the picture of the dress from that collection, and we just keep that for ourselves.
Onwards. So your famous pink hair.
Oh, the pink hair.
Why pink?
I went to China in 1979, when I was lucky that my friend Corrie said, I can get us on a trip to China. And it was one of the first trips that they opened up. And I went to China. No one had anything bigger than the tiniest wristwatch. No makeup. Everyone was in either navy blue suits, Mao suits, or army uniform. Nothing. The only bright things were the children. It was so cold. Even indoors, that I had to keep my camera, because they were battery cameras still, in my bra, because the battery got too cold to work. And no one had any makeup, and I had sort of green hair that I covered over, because I felt I could have been a gorilla, that people would stop in the street and watch us. But anyway, so I did all the drawings, and that was lovely. And then I came back to London and thought I'll do a Chinese collection, and it was in green and red. And then I thought red China, and then I dyed my hair pink, because it's very easy. Pink is so easy to keep. It stayed that way.
You've always been very experimental in terms of your hair and your makeup. Why is that important to you?
I suppose it's like my own suit of armour, really. Do you know what I mean? I don't feel myself if I'm not made up, and if I haven't done anything. And then I always make sure I'm fully made up. For example, I can always rely on the fact that if I get to go and take the dustbins out early, there's people waiting to go in the museum to take a photograph. And if I look terrible, it would look worse. So
you've got to be your own advert.
Keep myself looking right.
Thank you. So
here?
Princess Diana, who you dressed 6 or 7
Diana.
times, wasn't it?
Yes.
How would you describe Princess Diana? What made her different to the other members of the royal family?
She was very, very shy. And the first time she came round with Sarah.
Ferguson.
And they both came into the shop. And then that's her dress I made when she announced that she was pregnant.
With William.
When she was in Japan. Yes.
Yeah. You said over the decade you met her that she changed a lot. In what way?
I think she got more confident in herself. You know, when she first came in, she was very, very shy. And I think she gradually learnt, you know, how to handle herself and also what clothes would do for her. Although, you know, different things were wonderful to learn. Like I was doing a beautiful white wrap dress. We haven't got a picture of that one. And she said, well, make sure the wrap's really far over because you can be sure that I'll get out of the car and there'll be a photographer at just the wrong angle if it doesn't wrap very well.
I can't imagine.
You know,
It must be
so
horrible.
they're all things that we don't have to think about.
No, I've certainly never thought about the paparazzi trying to take a picture of my skirt. It's true. On to the next slide. Thank you. So this is the Fashion Textiles Museum, which you founded during a bit of a lull. So the 90s hit, minimalism and grunge was in, your maximalism, your colour fell
And
out
I
of
was
fashion.
just sort of like managing here and there. It was, and at that time, people weren't so interested in the chiffon dresses. And Andrew Logan rings me up because I had a house in Notting Hill. And he said to me, Zandra, you've always wanted to do a museum. You've got all your clothes that you've been saving. Why don't you make the museum? And I said, what do you think I am, made of money? And he said, I found this warehouse that would be perfect for your museum. And they hadn't built the Shard, so it was affordable, so I could sell my house and I could buy the building. Of course, I lived in squalor for the next 5 years, but with all the boxes and everything. But in the end, I managed to. The government turned me down to build a museum, but I managed to, with my boyfriend, who was the president of Warner Brothers Theatres. He said to me, "You don't give up at this stage. We're build 9 flats on the top, and we're pre-sell 8 of them," and that paid for student conversion.
Amazing. During this time, you also then, you came up with a plan B because the fashion industry was looking the other way. So you went into opera and designed costumes for the opera.
Well, I was very lucky in San Diego, I sometimes very shamefully call it the village of San Diego, because in the village of London, I don't get to know the head of the opera, whereas in San Diego, I met the head of the opera, and he said, have you ever done an opera? And I said, oh, no. He said, would you like to? So I did first of all the Magic Flute, then I did the Pearlfishers that has done, 19 towns around America.
Wow,
It's travelling.
gosh.
And then I did Aida, which was it went to 3 towns in America, and it did come to the English National for 2 seasons. So that was fun to do. I love dressing lovely fat opera stars who are usually they're usually about size 18, but they want to look about size 10. And you have to work out how you can get them to sing in a corset. And the other thing that's wonderful about opera, none of the jewellery must rattle. So when you see they're loaded in jewels, it's got to be on elastic and it mustn't move and ruin the singing. But the other thing that amazes me is the fact that whatever they're doing, whether they're dying on the stage, they still have to be able to see the conductor. It's incredible. Like they're dying in Aida and they're either lying down here or they're looking at the screen up there. I think it's magical.
It is incredibly impressive to me, though, during that time, it must have been difficult when the designs and the fashion designs that you'd worked so hard for were no longer a flavour of the month. How did you keep going mentally? Because you did keep designing clothes as well as the opera and founding a museum. How did you keep going?
Well, we've still, funnily enough, once COVID happened, and if you read that far into the book, they then said it was right at the beginning of COVID, and Andrew, who used to do yoga lessons in my penthouse, and he said, Sandra, you never do yoga, you always stay down at work. Come on, you do the yoga class. So we're lying breathing, and my stomach's full and I haven't eaten all day, so I decided to my doctor organised for me to have an x-ray, and then they said you've got a 13 centimetre growth and you probably got 6 months. What I don't understand is, mark you, that's now several years away.
That was 4 years ago now.
It was sort of like something that said to me, now Zandra, you've got to pull your life together. So I had to do a where you don't put me together again, and
Gosh, what's that called? Do not resuscitate.
Do not resuscitate. I formed the Zandra Rhodes Foundation, and since then we've been putting all the clothes together and found out that I'd saved over 6,000 garments that we'd all put away in boxes and not done anything with. And so I've been gradually making sure that the fabrics and the garments go to different museums across the world, like the V&A and then the Met in New York. So we're working with different museums now to see who wants different things.
Such resilience, mentally and physically.
It kept me busy.
What's the secret to career longevity in fashion, do you think, Zandra?
Probably never to give up. I'm sure that's the same with most things. I think you mustn't give up. It would defeat you. And my friends, who are prepared to listen.
And on to our final slide, which I think is you and
you
your
know it? Oh, that's with David, isn't
dear
it?
friend David Sassoon at the Queen's
That's
Jubilee.
Queen's Jubilee Dames in Jags. So I've got my red, white and blue hat on, and we were in a Jaguar and we were sort of waving. I think we were behind Joan Collins and in front of Twiggy.
Good company then.
But the funniest thing was Joan Collins was most concerned that if the cars were going out together, that she was the correct side as we go, as the cars go up.
Her best side, do you mean? She had to have a best
probably
side.
which was her best side for the crowd. And and the funniest thing was the person that got all the publicity, who's that lovely cooking lady? Her car broke down.
Prue Leith, was it? Yeah.
Prue Leith, her car broke down, so she got all the publicity.
Poor old Joan. Final question, because we are very much out of time. We've got to open the stage for other people to talk. But you turned 84 last week. Was it last week? Week before?
I think it's the week before.
Yeah. What's been your proudest moment, Zandra? You've lived such a full life. What has been your proudest moment?
Getting this book done, I think. Well, no, because I think it required a lot of bravery, and the fact that you coaxed the stories out of me, which meant I could face some of the things that I'd always hidden away, And it's been very, very interesting from that point of view.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Dame Zandra Rhodes.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions they'd love to ask Zandra?
Do you have to have a mic, or can we hear everyone?
This lady over here. Oh, yes, perfect.
Did your mother get to see how successful you were? You became.
She never knew.
Oh, really? Okay.
She died when? Just a minute. She died when I was 26, before I started to do my own collection. But I'm sure she knows.
It's been fantastic. You're an inspiration. Really
she's
wonderful.
been an inspiration. She was wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you.
There's another one
lady.
here.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Thank you. I went to the Bieber exhibition a couple of months ago at the museum, and it just reminded me of all my brother's old girlfriends. But is there a period of history or a place where you wish you could go back to have been designing in?
Oh, gosh.
Oh, great question.
I think I forgot to mention Bieber earlier on, because that's all part of the same period. I don't know whether it's our age that we're looking back and we're thinking that of seeing that with like golden spectacles or whatever you're going to say. And I couldn't believe the publicity that whole Bieber thing got, and then that book signing and everything, which has been really wonderful. I wonder if that really dates me, and that I think it was a wonderful period. It was a period of experimentation, trying things. They didn't have lots of coloured makeup. We'd go to Woolworths to find colours and everything like that, and the Woolworths rings and all those things. So I think it was a lovely time, whether we're looking back at it because of that. But I was fighting for things then, so it's been always, but I think life's always up and down. I think you just have to face it as best you can with whatever comes at you and try and pretend it's the best thing that happened. Do we want another lady
in the front
here?
I can shout.
All right, you can shout as long as
Perfect.
we'll repeat
I
your
can
question.
repeat the question, yeah.
How's that? Oh, there we are.
It's not really a question. It's something to show you. My best friend here, joining us today. Do you recognise it? Stand up. Her dress. This is one of yours.
Oh, how wonderful. Oh,
We had
thank
to
you.
show you.
And you still got it.
Talking about hoarding, I got married in '81, and this was my going away outfit.
And you still got it.
And I managed to squeeze, thanks to the elastic
It
waist
looks wonderful. It looks wonderful.
and different shoes. But thank you so much. And,
But that's what I think is the fact that I think in
Timeless
this country
design.
we've got originality and excitement, and it's a case of thinking, working things around and trying them out in different ways. I think it's got to, because we can't fill the world with waste, you know? Oh, she's making you run for your money.
Hi, I work with a charity that dresses women who want to work, and I've seen the transformative power of clothing. I was just wondering, did you have any hopes for the women or the people, Freddie Mercury, who wore your clothes, who wear your clothes?
What do I...
Do you have any, when you were designing and creating, did you have hopes for the people
What you
who
mean,
wear
did
your
I-
clothes?
How did you want them to feel in your clothes? Is
Yeah.
that what you mean?
Oh,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
lovely when you know that the clothes make them feel great. I once went to a concert in New York, and I didn't know this was going to happen, and it was a charity, and then a woman came out to do the speeches, and she went like this in one of my jackets, which was fantastic, although her husband said, I don't like spending all that much money all the time. But, you know, it's nice if they keep them and get things down and re-wear it in a different way. I think somehow in this country we've got more of that capability too, in, you know, make do and mend and do all sorts of exotic things, that I think we've got hope to keep going and leading.
I think one of the things about your clothes is how comfortable they are. I think that's why there's such a broad appeal, because they feel good.
Yes, you're
You don't
not
feel
always having to
restricted.
make sure you're in the right position.
No, it's important. Any other questions?
I would just like to say thank you.
Hello, Zandra.
Oh, sorry.
Over here. That way.
Oh, thank you.
The gentleman over here.
Yeah. Hi, Zandra. It's the second time I've seen you. Back in 1983, you were having your first book done, and you had to get Jill Murphy to come over, and you would. I would make the duplicate transparency, so your thing go around. And it was in November when it was dark, and I was just leaving, and there's a phone call, and it was you, and you said, "Can you come downstairs?" I went downstairs. She said, "This is just for you. This is your I want you to have this little present." And I said, "Oh, that's really nice." And she put that, and it was a maternity dress for my wife, and I've used that, and then now we had 3 children, and then we had our daughter and son. They've also had 3 children. So each time we use that same maternity dress.
Oh, thank you.
That's lovely. I think we might have time for one more question, if anyone else has one. Oh, there's a lady over here.
Ah,
Zandra, it's very nice to see you. I did actually meet you once in India with Andrew Logan. I wanted to ask you, you wear a lot of Andrew's jewellery. Do you make things for Andrew?
he's got a couple of my things that he wears, and I usually do his half when he does the alternative Miss World. I do the women's half, and I know he's planning another one, which will be a lot of work for next year. And as you can see, I've got his jewellery on, which I always find. And if you just look up, we do have Andrew and I do sales just before Christmas. It will be on the web when we do sales of our things.
Yeah, it'll be on your Instagram
Yes.
page. Yeah. Okay. Do we have time for another question? Can we squeeze any more in?
Well, thank you for
actually,
all
this is
being here.
perfect. Thank you.